from the right. Betty Turner.
Sandra O'Connor.
Mary Skeens. Erica Glass.
Paul J. Gilmer Sr.
Stu Nichols.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being conducted in person and online. If anyone participating online needs help with Zoom during this meeting, please email Luke Carter at lucas.carter@greensboro-nc.gov. Members of the Commission are appointed by the City Council and serve without pay. The Commission reviews all original zoning and rezoning requests for the City of Greensboro. Each Commissioner normally visits each site prior to this meeting. The procedure used at all public hearings is as follows. The planning staff presents background information and makes a recommendation. The applicant will present a short summary of how he or she communicated with the neighborhood and why the request is reasonable. Any Commissioner member may ask questions once the presenter has completed their presentation. Those wanting to speak in favor, along with the applicant, have a shared total of 10 minutes to speak. Then those wanting to speak in opposition to the request have a shared total of 10 minutes to speak. The applicant and those in favor of the request share 5 minutes of rebuttal time. Those in opposition to the request share 5 minutes of rebuttal time. When a case is called that you are interested in, people wishing to speak online will need to use the raised hand function under the reaction button and will be called upon to speak in the order in which hands were raised. People find the raised hand function under the reaction button. People wishing to speak in person will need to come to the podium. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Please also direct all comments and questions to the zoning commissioners. Participants in the zone meeting will be able to view the meeting and speak when they are called upon. This meeting is being recorded and televised on Greensboro Television Network, GTN. In addition, the telecast is being closed captioned for the hearing impaired. All commissioners are required to vote unless they have a conflict of interest. The process after our deliberation, all approved ordinances or denied cases receiving 6 or more favorable votes will constitute a final action unless an appeal is submitted in writing to the Planning Department and the appeal fee is paid within 10 days. All ordinances receiving a majority of favorable votes but less than 6 will be subject to a public hearing by the City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission may reorganize the meeting agenda. Cases in which no opposition has been expressed to the Planning Department and in which Commission members do not feel necessitates an in-depth discussion will move to the top of the agenda and will become the expedited agenda. Staff will provide a shortened presentation for those cases. The applicant will have up to 2 minutes to address the Commission if they desire. Acknowledgements of absence. Mr. Peterson and Mr. Downing will not be here tonight, and maybe we'll have good news about Mr. Downing's child being born. Approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the October 21st, 24 minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor and Mr. Nichols. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Now we need to have some insights from our city attorney.
Assistant City Attorney, Chair Maggott. Thank you, Chair Maggott, and good evening, everyone. Much of the Planning and Zoning Commission's work this evening will relate to the consideration of rezoning applications. I'd like to remind everyone in attendance that when the Commission considers rezoning applications, its determinations are based on the land uses that are allowed under the zoning district that's been put forth in the application, as well as any conditions that have been proposed by the applicant. Land use impacts on public infrastructure are relevant in rezoning matters, and it's important to know that the Commission is not here to determine all details of a development. That involves staff input and evaluation that goes beyond the scope of the Commission's work. If a rezoning would generate a certain amount of traffic flow, the Commissioners will have been provided with a summary traffic impact study. Meanwhile, many site-specific development features, such as the management of stormwater, are evaluated through the Technical Review Committee rather than in this forum tonight. Lastly, concerns that are not related to land use are not germane to the Commission's consideration of rezoning applications. For example, generalized concerns about crime rates, current or anticipated school capacity, and questions of who may own or live at a subject property or use the subject property are not for the Commission's consideration. If there are questions about matters that are not addressed this evening, those may be referred to the Planning Department or the Technical Review Committee as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkman, I understand that there's no withdrawals or continuances.
Yes, that is correct.
It's my understanding we have a few cases in opposition tonight. The first one is Z24-11-001, 4409 North Danbury Castle Road. The second is Z24-11-004, 1326 Seminole Drive. I'd like to take a moment to make sure that no one here in the chamber or online has opposition to any of the other cases. And those cases would be 2400 Brewington Siebert Place, 3410 McConnell Road, and that's it.
And the last one's 8309.
Oh, and
West
I'm
Market.
sorry, and 11065 West Market Street. Did I say that right? No opposition? Okay. Therefore, we will expedite those two cases and begin with the Market Street. Which one? Oh.
We're going to pull up the case for
We're going to
you.
do the expedited first. Okay. So we'll start with 11001, 002. Okay. Thank you. A rezoning request from R3 residential single family 3 to R5 residential single family 5 for the property identified as 2400-YY Brewington Siebert Place, generally described as west of Brewington Siebert Place and east of Tangent Court, 4.082 acres, and that is Z-24-11-002.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you. This is the zoning map of the subject property. The subject property is the crosshatched area there. To the north, you've got RM8 zoning district with multifamily there, and then you've got single family to the north in the R3. There's R3 and single family to the east, south, and west as well. There were no conditions with this request. In recommending approval, staff notes that the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan designates the site as urban general on the future built form map and residential on the future land use map. The proposed rezoning request supports both the comprehensive plan's Creating Great Places goal to expand Greensboro's citywide network of unique neighborhoods, offering residents of all walks of life a variety of quality housing choices, and filling in our framework goal to arrange our land uses to create a more vibrant and livable Greensboro. The proposed R5 zoning district permits similar uses to the existing R3 zoning, but allows them at a greater flexibility of individual lot configurations and slightly smaller lot sizes. The request is also consistent with the residential zoning classifications that are found on surrounding properties. With that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Does the commission have any questions? Seeing none, would the applicant like to make any comments? You have up to 2 minutes. Would you please come forward and give your name and address?
Planning Board. Victor Johnson, 8194 Rollin Drive, Brown Summit, North Carolina 27214. I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. John Lumpkins, who owns the property. I'm going to be the developer and the contractor on this property. We just want to help build Greensboro up and make a nice community like the one that's already around. And Mr. Lumpkins, who is the owner of the property, he's a part of the board out there in the area of the property location, and he asked me to come in and help him, and that's what I just come and do, and just do the building and the development of the project.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, without further objection, we will close the public hearing. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
The Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its action to recommend approval of the rezoning request for the property at 2400 YY Brewington Seabird Place from R3 Residential Single Family 3 to R5 Residential Single Family 5 to be consistent with the adopted Greensboro 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. The proposed R5 zoning district permits uses that fit the context of the surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owners and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Commissioner Gilmer, second.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor and Mr. Gilbert. We will take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. This approval constitutes a final action unless an appeal is submitted in writing to the Planning Department and the appeal fee paid within 10 days. Anyone may file such appeal. All such appeals will be subject to a public hearing at the Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 City Council meeting. All adjoining property owners will be notified of any such appeal. The next case, Z24-11-003, a rezoning request from R5 Residential Single Family to CDLI Conditional District Light Industrial for the property identified as 3410 to 3432 McConnell Road, generally described as south of McConnell Road and east of Bridge Point Road, 43.75 acres. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I'm sorry, Chair Maggot. This is the zoning map of the subject property. One thing that you'll notice on this, and I just want to draw attention to this real quick because it looks a little jumbled, but there are street names in the subject property. That's because before, when it was rezoned to R5, they went as far as preliminary plat approval and had the street names picked out for a potential subdivision at this site. That did not work out. And so you see those on the map, but those roads are actually not there. So the property is again located at 3410 through 3432 McConnell Road and contains approximately 43.751 acres. This is a rezoning request from R5 to Conditional District Light Industrial. To the north are agricultural uses and single-family dwellings, and they are zoned ag, county ag. To the east are residential uses, single-family residential uses, and agricultural uses, also zoned ag. To the south is R3, but you've got I-40 there. And then to the west, you have a little bit of county ag, some county RS30 with single family, and then a religious assembly use at the R3 at the northwest there. There are two conditions that are proposed by the applicant. And in recommending approval of this request, staff notes that the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan's future built form map currently designates the subject property as urban general. The Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates the property as residential, which again is a remnant of the R5 zoning that you see currently. Immediately surrounding the property, though, you see that the site is designated industrial on the future built form map. Any approval of this request to the conditional district LI would have the effect of amending the future land use map to to industrial from residential as well. The rezoning request supports the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan's growing economic competitiveness goal to increase and preserve the inventory of developable sites compatible with corporate and industrial uses. And the proposed CDLI zoning district, as conditioned, permits all uses allowed in the LI zoning district except for a brewery, craft distillery, a larger scale distillery, fuel oil sales, and a microbrewery. The uses permitted under this request are similar to existing uses present in the surrounding area as you go closer to the interstate. Care should be taken with respect to building orientation, building materials, and height, and visual buffers to ensure an appropriate transition to the lower density residential uses on adjacent properties. And with that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Does the commission have any questions?
I do. Light industrial, can you specify or remind me what that is again?
I'm sorry?
Light industrial, is that manufacturing, limited manufacturing?
It would be light, yes ma'am, it would be light manufacturing, generally uses that are compatible with residential. They would have a low amount of noise, and it's certainly not like heavy industrial where you could have heavy fumes and dust and noise coming from it. It would be more in keeping with kind of adjacent residential uses, but it does allow for some manufacturing. Warehouse uses are generally in light industrial zoning districts.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to make a comment? You have up to 2 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Good evening, Brian Hall, Samet Corporation, 309 Gallimore Dairy Road. Chair, members of the board, thanks for the opportunity. We're here on behalf of Goodwill Industries of Central North Carolina. We all know Goodwill. We're all likely supporters of Goodwill. This is part of their growth and part of their expansion plans. This would help them relocate part of the operation that's on South Eugene Street. Some of the sorting and storage and warehousing that they do out to the proposed site on McConnell Road. That enables their trucks to get out to the McConnell Road interchange on I-40 much easier, much quicker. And also when you look at their network of retail stores, not only across Guilford County, but Alamance County, Rockingham County to the north, this is a central location for them to be able to distribute their goods to all their retail outlets. The conditions that we've proposed are there to protect some of the residential neighbors that we see to the west, as well as limit what might be some more challenging uses in the light industrial. We've chosen to take those off the table, again, to try to show the goodwill of our customer to be able to make this project go. Their facility would sort, store, warehouse product for their stores, and there would also be a small retail component like exists today on the store at South Eugene Street. So that would enable them also to grow the job creation, the skills and investment and training in the facility on South Eugene once this new facility is up and built on McConnell Road. Thanks for the opportunity. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing none, without further objection, Oh, David Michaels, would you like to speak? But they only are allowed to speak for 2 minutes, and they've already used it. You've got 13 seconds.
I have 13 seconds. My name is David Michaels. I'm with Red Wolf Development Company. We own property that's adjacent to this site. We used to own this property back in 2006. So the street names you saw, we actually came up with those and intended to be a residential neighborhood. And by the fact that 18 years have passed and there's been no residential development there, I think you can see that's probably not the ideal use for this site. So we do support this request. I attended the neighborhood meeting, was pleased with the plan that they put forth, and so we'd be happy to see this on this site.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, the time is up for... All right, come forward.
Good evening.
Are you opposed to this?
You want to consider 2 minutes for opposition?
Yeah.
Potentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not rightfully opposed to it. I have 9 parcels adjacent to it. I've owned this property
Could you give us your name and address, please?
Keith Sellers, 1208 Stevens Street, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Thank you.
I have parcels, 9 parcels adjacent to it. I was notified by mail by the developer, and the community meeting was on the 5th, which is election day. I don't understand why anyone would schedule a community meeting on election day. I just think it was a disservice to the community. It's disrespectful for that process to go out like that. I just want to put that on the record. In addition to that, my other concern is that it's my understanding that the letters went out to folks who have properties within 750 feet of the location. I think the city of Greensboro should reconsider doing at least a 1 mile radius because of as the city's growing and because of the highway there is bifurcated by residents in that area. And I think people need to know what's happening in their community.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, but I do support it. I do like the plan, but I think communication needs to be much better.
Thank you. Duly noted. Thank you. Okay, any questions from the commissioners? All right, seeing none, without further objection, we will close the public hearing. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Nichols.
The Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its action to recommend approval of the rezoning request of the properties at 3410 through 3432 McConnell Road from the current zoning of R5 residential single family 5 per acre to CDLI conditional district light industrial to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. The proposed CDLI zoning district as conditioned permits uses that fit the context of the surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Commissioner Gilmer seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols and Mr. Gilbert. All right, we will take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes. This approval constitutes a final action unless an appeal is submitted in writing to the planning department and the appeal fee paid within 10 days. Anyone may file such appeal. All such appeals will be subject to a public hearing at the Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 City Council meeting. All adjoining property owners will be notified of any such appeal. The next case in the expedited. Item Z 24-11-005, a rezoning request from CDLI Conditional District Light Industrial and LI Light Industrial to CDHI Conditional District Heavy Industrial for the properties identified as 8309 West Market Street, 110 and 120 South Regional Road, generally described as south of West Market Street and west of South Regional Road, 16.38 acres. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair Magid. This is the zoning map of the subject property. The subject property is currently has two zoning classifications on it, the conditional district light industrial and light industrial, and the request is to rezone it to conditional district heavy industrial. North of the request is kind of a mix of zoning districts. You've got conditional district light industrial to the north, which has the park and ride. You've got some residential single family, which are actually undeveloped directly across West Market Street from this site. And you have a bank and a utility substation in the commercial medium. To the east, you have heavy industrial and R3, which actually has tractor-trailer truck storage at that location. South of the request is you have a mixed or multi-tenant office building and then some undeveloped land with a conditional district light industrial, and then you've got conditional district light industrial to the west as well. The applicant has proposed additional uses to be conditioned out of this request, meaning that these uses would not be permitted. And so I will read those, and I'll need the Planning and Zoning Commission to accept this expanded condition with a vote. The condition would read, all uses permitted under the HI zoning district except cemeteries, wastewater treatment plant and water reclamation facility, water treatment facilities, salvage yards, junkyards and scrap processing, resource extraction, which would be mining or quarrying, recycling processing centers, land clearing and inert debris landfills, major, junk motor vehicles, livestock slaughtering, processing of food and related products, and recycling collection points.
That's quite a mouthful. Thank you. I need a motion to approve this.
I move that we add the additional items to the existing one on the condition.
Give her a second.
Thank you, Ms. Skeens and Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you very much. And, sorry.
Vote on. Get a vote.
You do need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right. In recommending approval of this request, staff notes that the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan's future built form map designates the subject property as planned industrial within a neighborhood scale activity center. The Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates this property as commercial and industrial. The proposed rezoning request supports the Comprehensive Plan's filling in our framework goal to attract world-class development to transform underutilized sites and buildings into valued assets for the community. It is also supported by the prioritizing sustainability goal to build economic resilience, expanding the local economy's ability to withstand and adjust to changes at the regional, national, and global scales. The proposed conditional district heavy industrial zoning district, as conditioned, would allow uses that are complementary to those that are existing in the surrounding area. The request is also reasonable because it is located along the railroad and has quick access to an interstate highway. With that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Does the commission have any questions? Okay. Would the applicant like to make any comments? You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. It's Mark Isaacson at 804 Green Valley Road. Just here to answer any questions that the commission may have. The additional conditions or excluded uses, I would say, are the result of working with our adjoining property owner who expressed some concerns about not necessarily what this group will do, but years into the future what may happen there. And so we were glad to exclude those uses. They're really not practical on a parcel this size anyway. we're happy to see this use in this location. It's right near the airport. It's in a fairly industrial area anyway. I think it's very consistent with the other uses and compatible. Glad to answer any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to present this.
Thank you, Mr. Isaacson. Does any commissioner have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, without further objection, we will close the public hearing. I will entertain a motion. Thank you, Ms. Turner.
This is regarding Z2411-005. The Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its action to recommend approval of the rezoning request for the properties at 8309 West Market Street, 110 and 120 South Regional Road, from CDLI, Conditional District Light Industrial, and LI, Light Industrial, to CDHI, Conditional District Heavy Industrial, to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. 1, the request is consistent with the Comprehensive Plan's future built form map and future land use map. 2, the proposed CDHI zoning district as conditioned permits uses that fit the context of the surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. 3, the request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Sandra O'Connor, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Turner and Ms. O'Connell. Now, we will take a vote. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 8-0. This approval constitutes a final action unless an appeal is submitted in writing to the Planning Department and the appeal fee paid within 10 days. Anyone may file such appeal. All such appeals will be subject to a public hearing on Tuesday, December 17th, 2024, City Council meeting. All adjoining property owners will be notified of any such appeal. I'm sorry, there's 7 of us tonight. We have a baby coming. I'm forgetting about that one.
They're not here yet, so we can't count them.
That's right, but we hope it's going to be coming soon for his sake. All right. So the next item, we will be moving to the regular agenda. Okay. Item PLP 24-36 and Z 24-11-001, an annexation and original zoning request from County CZPDRSP, conditional zoning and planning development, residential with special use permit for the master sign plan, to City R5 residential single family 5 for the property identified as 4409 North Danbury Castle Road, generally described as west of North Danbury Castle Road and north of I-73, 3.76 acres. And Mr. Nelson, we'll hear from you.
Thank you, Chair Megan. Well, that is, so, as you mentioned, the subject property contains approximately 3.176 acres and is located west of North Danby Castle Road and north of Interstate 73. This is an annexation and original zoning request from County Conditional Zoning Plan Development Residential with a special use permit for the master sign plan to City R5, residential single family 5. And for a little bit of context, that long county designation, sort of a relic from the 80s, granting them the right for that master sign plan. It does not grant them any additional use rights in this instance. It's still residential. North of the request is zone CZMXU, conditional zoning mixed use, and county RS20, residential single family. East and south of the request are zoned county CZ PD RSP as well. And west of the request is zoned county CZ MXU for conditional zoning mixed use. This is the aerial map of the area showing the current property is currently undeveloped. North of the request contains an office use and single-family dwellings. East of the request contains single-family dwellings. South of the request contains I-73 and single-family dwellings farther south. And west of the request contains that office use. This image shows the subject property as seen from North Danby Castle Road. This image shows an office building located northwest of the request on High Point Road, zoned county CZ MXU. And this image shows an example of the single-family dwellings located north of the request on Roland Road, zoned county RS20. And again, for reference, this property has no access off Roland Road. This image shows an example of the single-family dwellings located east of the request on North Danby Castle Road, zone county CZ PD RSP. This image shows another example of the single-family dwellings located east of the request, zone county CZ PD RSP.
Yeah, and just real quick, we think they're doing work in the courtyard still. That's where the noise is coming from. So just make sure you're speaking into the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kirkman.
Speaking of county zoning, this image shows Interstate 73. Yeah, this image shows Interstate 73 located south of the request, also zone county CZ PD RSP. And this view is facing east on North Danby Castle Road. The subject property is directly behind you in this view. And this view is facing west on North Danby Castle Road. The subject property is located at the end of the road here. And in recommending approval of the request, staff noted that the GSO 2040 comprehensive plan designates this site as urban general on the future built form map and residential on the future land use map. Staff found that the proposed original zoning request supports both the comprehensive plan's creating great places goal to expand Greensboro's citywide network of unique neighborhoods, offering residents of all walks of life a variety of quality housing choices, and the filling in our framework big idea to arrange our land uses for where we live, work, attend school, shop, and enjoy our free time to create a more vibrant, livable Greensboro. The proposed R5 zoning district is primarily intended to accommodate low-density, single-family detached residential development of up to 5 dwelling units per acre. The proposed original zoning request allows for uses that are similar to existing uses in the surrounding area, and may I have to answer any questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. If the applicant would come forward and give your name and address, you have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. My name is Frank Ford. My address is 2918 Martinsville Road, and I'm here tonight on behalf of McKinney and Sons, who are going to do the construction here. If it's okay, I'd like to hand out a couple of pictures. Yeah. And you can certainly keep those for what they're worth. The reason we're here tonight is because two things happened. One, a while ago, the City Council decided that if you're going to use city water and sewer, you're going to have to be annexed into the city of Greensboro. And I think all of us, certainly myself and any other Greensboro taxpayer, would believe that if you're going to use city water and sewer, you should be within the city of Greensboro city limits and pay city taxes. And so what we're really doing tonight is coming here to ask you if you will allow us to pay city taxes on the lots that we're going to build. Somewhat unusual request, I know, but that's what it is. The first picture that you see is basically what Mr. Nelson, thank you so much, showed you. And what you can see is what's around us is really single family. And what we're proposing to do is really single family. The majority of the homes around us are between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet. And we're proposing to build homes that are between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet. These would be a little bit higher than entry-level homes, but I think they'd be reasonable. I also think the houses that are out there are also similar type of homes. If you switch over to the second page, you'll see what are the current, thank you, Mike. The yellow shows what we're doing. The white south, if you will, of the black line that I drew in there are the existing lots that already exist. I-73 now, as you can see, if I may, I-73, as you can see, goes along the back of it. So what happened was when the DOT came in, they condemned all the land that they needed for I-73, including the yellow, which is what we had purchased from the NCDOT. And as you can see, the lots that extend down that would be in I-73 are no longer obviously there, and I-73 is there. I think that later tonight we reached out, or they reached out to us earlier today, the Kings Mill HOA group. And I think their main opposition is going to be density. And I really think that if you look at our proposed density, especially if you look at the cul-de-sac on the other side, you're really seeing a project that fits in perfectly here. While we're asking for R5 zoning, the actual density is around 3.1, 3.3 units per acre. So I think it's consistent with what's out there. I think it'll be an enhancement to the community that's out there. The other issue that may be brought up is traffic, and quite frankly, those are public streets. We're going to access our 11 or 12 lots all over public streets, and 11 or 12 single-family homes are just not going to have an impact on those people that live there currently. So unless there's any questions, we're supporting 2024. This is an infill development. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know that many people come before any August board and ask to pay taxes, but that's what we're doing this evening. So we hope we have your support. And I'm more than willing to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, questions?
Typically, we receive what's called a neighborhood communication summary. I don't have one from you. What did you do about neighborhood meetings, explaining to the community what you're doing, answering any questions that might have come up in that meeting?
I apologize. We did not. They reached out to us, and we answered their questions. To say that I was unaware of that is the honest answer. I'm sorry. I was not aware that we had to conduct a neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Is Mr. McKinney here to speak as well?
Mr. Trace McKinney is here with me.
Does he wish to speak? Because you have a little bit more time.
No, ma'am. No.
No? All right.
We're good.
Thank
you.
you. All right. So we'll move to the opposition. Those wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward and give your name and address. As a group, you have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Stephen Blundell, 4400 Dublin Castle. No, we were not contacted. No, we didn't reach out to them. I did get a phone call today after I called down here. Somehow they found out about me and called me. But let's move on. We're a 105-house HOA community. Many of the community were not notified even because the 750-foot rule. So many of the people in our community that will be impacted by this because the only access will be through our HOA community. Now, originally before that highway, when this community was being built, that street was going to go through. There would have been more than one way in and out. Now there's only one way. So all of this traffic will be going from Danby Castle on to Kings Mill, right past our court, past our pool. It is going to be significant. There's just 6 houses right now on that street, so this is going to be quite a bit different. We would like to have time. We have sent emails out just today to everyone that we had emails for to inform them about this. We would like to have time to have a neighborhood meeting. We think that this developer should have had a meeting with us to inform us of what they were doing so that we had a better understanding. It's going to be a dramatic change in what is happening in this area. Also, I think that it's important to know that there is a runoff pond legal agreement with Kings Mill, Kings Pond, and Sedgefield 9. So these houses, how are they going to be impacted as far as being responsible for the runoff and the retention ponds? Because all of these other communities are HOA communities. I don't know that this one is going to be, originally this was going to be part of our HOA until the highway was planned to go through this property taken away and now being developed separately. As what kind of community? Oh, also I want to, the fact that it's going to be an R5, which would give permission to as many as 5 houses per acre, but they're saying, well, we're only going to do such and such. I'm not comfortable with saying this is what we're going to allow, but they're promising they're going to do something less than that. So I'd like for it to know for certain what the density of this neighborhood is going to be. I have another speaker that wants to come up, so I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blundell. Please state your name and address.
Spencer Lewis, 2835 Pickering Drive, Pickering Road, Greensboro. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to address this. Stephen had mentioned most of the things I was going to bring up. Our development is 105 houses. We feel that not enough houses in our development receive notice of this proposed development. There's definitely potential for many of the homes to be affected by additional traffic who don't even know about this process. We are scurrying trying to alert as many residents as possible. So we would like more time to be able to reach out to members of our community and get their feedback so we can answer their questions and try to make sure that, this process, if it goes forward, that it addresses everybody and that could be affected. It is helpful to hear that the number of homes is proposed to be 11 or 12 instead of 15. So that is good. As Stephen or the previous speaker had mentioned, unfortunately our neighborhood has had bad experience with development where we've had a lot of soil runoff into our retention pond, and that has created issues with our association along with another association being responsible for, we've already paid once half of it to have that separate neighborhood retention pond dredged. So we really are cognizant of that, and we're trying to avoid that as well. In terms of the number of traffic, as Stephen had mentioned, there's 6 homes on there. It's rather quiet. You're going to add 11, 12 plus homes. It's not just, you figured average 2 cars per home, but then you get plumbers and pizza delivery and all that. So there's going to be additional traffic, garbage or refuge disposal and those types of things, emergency vehicles and such. So we do want to give an opportunity for our residents to be able to express their concerns, or and we can have discussions with the developer. We're certainly want to be open to that as well. We're not trying to say with an iron fist no, but we would like more information. We would like more time to be able to reach our community and get their feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Okay, thank you.
Wait 1 minute. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Quick question.
Yes.
The whole retention pond thing that was mentioned earlier, is this an agreement through Sedgefield Sanitary, or is this facility that was put in when Kings Mill, Kings Pond was developed?
The latter. So this was a retention pond built when Kings Pond and Kings Mill subdivisions were built, and it's in conjunction with Sedgefield 9. So there's an agreement
Okay.
there's 2 retention ponds and 3 different homeowner associations being involved in this water runoff. Where exactly the water runoff would be for this particular development, I can't say. I'm not an engineer. I haven't gone out there and walked around, but it is a concern of ours.
Because this is a joint agreement between the 3.
Yes, ma'am.
And you share maintenance and assessments and cleanouts and.
You are exactly right. And we're responsible. It's set forth in all of our bylaws, and our association is responsible for the 2 associations between Kings Pond and Kings Mill add up to 50%. So both our association and the neighboring association is responsible for 25% each to clean out Sedgefield 9's pond, and that's already happened once when 73 came through and other development, and it caused an influx of soil to go into the creek and to the retention pond.
So you're concerned as to how this group is going to tie into what you've already got in terms of a agreement on the retention ponds?
Yes, ma'am.
And there's been no discussions along those lines?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I was hoping that staff would confirm both speakers in opposition mentioned that communication wasn't received, but the city sent out notifications about this. Did you receive those?
I did not, because apparently I'm outside that 750-foot bullseye. This topic came up during a homeowner association meeting on other topics, and then this subject just happened to come up. I had no idea about it, but it is what it is. So that's why we're trying to play catch up. So I didn't, as being a vice president.
But you're not in the radius.
I'm sorry.
You're not in the radius.
Yes, ma'am. So that radius is 750 feet, and so being the vice president of the association, I'm outside that radius, so I didn't even know anything about it, and therefore we're scurrying and trying to play catch up and make sure that all of our concerns would be addressed.
Thank you.
May I add something?
Chair Magid, there is a speaker online who wishes to speak as well.
Okay.
Because that 750 foot.
Please state your name. Please state your name and address.
Stephen Blundell. Because of the 750-foot notice, some of the houses that got notice are actually on the other side of 75. I believe that some are in the Sedgefield 9 area.
Mm-hmm.
They are almost not going to be impacted other than the retention pond aspect. But all of Kings Mill HOA is going to be impacted.
Yes, sir. But my question was whether or not you received the notice from the city, and if you're in the 750-foot radius.
I am. I have to be within the 750, but a good portion of our neighborhood is not.
I understand. Thank you.
But did you receive a notice from the city?
Excuse me?
Did you receive a notice from
I
the
did.
city?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, could we go to the person online?
Yes, can you hear me?
We need to, let's see if we can see you. Yes, good. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, this is Kimberly Gaines. I live at 4405 North Danby Castle Road. Actually, that house on the dead end was my house, and also you showed my neighbor's house. And our concern primarily, again, is the traffic flow that's going to come through there. If there's only one way in to those new homes, how is that going to affect the crime rate, the traffic, the single-family homes? What kind of population is going to reside in there? Another concern our neighbors on that street had is just the value of our properties in comparison to these new developed properties. Again, we were given very short notice about this. We did receive the information from the city, but only in the last week or so. So those are very much things that me and my neighbors are concerned about.
Thank you. move to a little rebuttal unless there's a question from the commissioners at this point. We heard from Mr. Lewis. That was the second person that spoke. Okay, so you have 5 minutes of rebuttal time.
Again, Frank Ford, 2918A. I understand and appreciate the concerns tonight. With respect to notice, I appreciate Ms. O'Connor's bringing up the point. Those people who are within the 750-foot radius did receive notice from the city of Greensboro. I know Mr. Kirkman professionally. I know Mr. Carter. I know that these people sent it out. I do understand and appreciate the gentleman who is the vice president of the association is here tonight, and he was outside of the 750-foot radius and didn't get notice. But nobody within the 750-foot radius who did get notice thought enough to contact him or to come here tonight, other than the gentleman who obviously put off what he did. If you turn back to the second page of the handout that I sent you, they are correct. There are 6 or 7 houses that are on North Dansby Castle Road. But if you look down what is Kings Mill Road, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, some 13 or 14 houses that were quote-unquote taken over by the DOT. Now, those houses were certainly allowed to be built, were thought to be built, and certainly the developers of Kings Mill intended to build those houses until I-73 got proposed. Now, I understand and appreciate the comment was that there was going to be another way out if that occurred. But as you can see on my map, there was no obligation by Westminster Homes to build further than that. So the simple fact that there was proposed way out doesn't mean there was going to be a way out. And there certainly was going to be 15 additional homes there. So I understand, again, I understand and appreciate concern, and I think you guys here at the Planning Board know that no one likes change. Whatever it is, if it's changing, it's something that somebody's going to be opposed to. I think if you look at the second page, which is highlighted in yellow, you see that this fits perfectly with this community. The density is what the density is. It shows 11 lots. Ms. Skeens, I think, adroitly pointed out, and the gentleman adroitly pointed out, that the Kings Mill Pond has had some issues or some controversy over the years. We have 2 proposals. One is we would join the Kings Mill Pond Association. Obviously, all the owners out there would have to agree to us joining it, and I think we would, if they would to do that, I think what we bring to them is several things. Number one is we would improve their pond, and they would, and obviously the pond was built in such a manner as to be big enough to handle all the runoff that we would propose. As a practical matter, I think the board understands and again appreciates that any development, and I think Mr. Kirkman and Mr. Carter would agree with me here, any development has to do the same amount of post-development runoff as they did pre-development runoff. So if we accomplish that by putting a pond on our own property, as we can do with either losing a lot or perhaps an underground facility across the street there in that land, we would do that. If the folks at Kings Mill are not acceptable to us joining their association and helping them improve their pond, keeping their pond up, then that's fine. We will handle our stormwater by ourselves. But either way, I think it's a win-win for the community. No stormwater from our development will go into the Kings Mill lot, into the Kings Mill pond, without their agreement, appreciation, and our assistance in bringing that pond up to what I would believe would be city standards, which are pretty much the same as county standards. Or we would simply handle our stormwater on our own. And at that point in time, as development rules require, we'd have no more runoff after development than exists before the development. And if we in fact did the development with our own pond or our own stormwater infrastructure, then there would actually be less runoff than there is currently. And I understand that I don't necessarily understand how the quote-unquote NCDOT could get away with putting additional sediment into the Kings Mill Pond unilaterally without anybody's say-so, but as we all know, the NCDOT does what the NCDOT does.
Will you stay there, Mr. Ford? I want to ask a question to Mr. Kirkman. Is this a conditional application?
No, this is a straight zoning request.
This is a straight zoning question. So, I'm thinking since we haven't had much outreach with the community, would you be willing to have a continuance on this so that you
and we
could...
would be willing to condition this to the 12 lots as shown on the piece of paper that you have.
No. What I'm... Yeah, yes. So you're answering conditional, and I'm saying to you, since the outreach to the community was something that a public meeting didn't occur, and we have people here who are speaking in opposition, would you be amendable to a continuance so that you would have time to have a public meeting and speak to these people directly about all of this?
And just to be clear, so it's a straight zoning application right now. If you continue the item so you can have some conversations with neighbors, it's still a straight zoning application moving forward. If you want to shift to a conditional, you need to withdraw this one and then refile as a conditional application.
I guess my question is, and I apologize for my ignorance here, but there's a requirement under the annexation ordinance that I have a public neighborhood meeting.
So the way it works is if you have a conditional zoning application, you're required to notify the city of efforts you took or didn't take to communicate with neighbors within 750 feet of the application. That's what the ordinance requires on there. If it's a straight application, there is not an ordinance requirement. There is a general expectation, I think, that the city has that we want applicants to reach out and talk to neighbors as much as they can, which is why I think the commission's asking the question about the continuance. Is that a fair?
Yes.
And to make sure that we're in agreement with this August board, we will certainly do what you guys ask us to do, and we have no problem continuing this so that we can have a discussion with the neighbors. But I think I was correct at the beginning in the sense that, and with all due respect, Ms. Geens, you said, did you have a neighborhood meeting? And I was like, we looked down and we didn't. And I was, quite frankly, I'll tell you, I was embarrassed to say to you that I didn't, but I wasn't nearly as embarrassed now as I was then, because under Mr. Kirkman's understanding, I wasn't required to have one. So what I'm being asked is, did I do something that wasn't required? And the answer is, I did not. Should I have done that? 100%. Will I continue this, have that discussion, and come back to you? If that's what this fine board would like, we would certainly do that.
While we're seeking clarification, could I ask another question? So if you do continue it, we get all of this covered. I'm just not familiar with what the process is for a new development affiliating or associating with an existing homeowners association. Is that supposed to be part of the developer's proposal, or is that something handled separately?
Yeah, Mr. Ford kind of touched on it. There's two different approaches. Basically, you can, if there's an existing association, you can certainly petition effectively to become part of that association, or they can create their own homeowners association. Excuse me. And then that's what maintains the common elements. So it's really two different options on there. There's no requirement to say on a subdivision, new subdivision adjacent to an existing subdivision has to become part of that subdivision for the purposes of maintaining common facilities on there. But if there are common facilities required, something has to be set up basically to cover that. So he's correct. There's two different options that can proceed.
Thank you.
And if you'd like, and I don't mind, I say almost on a daily basis, I'm not smart enough to be coy. We have reached out to our engineer and asked him several questions. And this becomes somewhat of a can of worms that comes into Mr. Kirkman and Mr. Mike Borchess of the City Stormwater Division. And that is this. So let's assume that, well, before I went to the adjacent HOA, Kings Mill and the ponds that we're talking about, I need to do a survey of the pond to make sure that it's big enough to handle the stormwater that we would propose to put in it. So there's really two things going on, and I apologize for seeing the confusion on your face, but there's one is we handle our stormwater ourselves. We have our own HOA, and we have absolutely nothing to do with Kings Mill, Kings Pond, or the pond that's there, okay? I think Mike would agree that we could do this development, we'd probably lose a lot, but have our own pond, our own stormwater structure in some manner of speaking.
Let me just break in here because stormwater is not something that is under our purview to be concerned about this. I'm more concerned about neighborhood outreach and, that aspect of this application.
And Mr. Ford, I think to help your options, this is an annexation and original zoning request, so it will go on automatically to City Council because of the annexation piece. You can certainly go that route and have conversations in between, or you can, as the Commission has suggested, if you want to continue this conversation at this level, have those conversations, and then come back for the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's your options.
I appreciate
But before he answers, I think he needs some legal advice, but that's just me. My question is, under the application that he made, which is currently before this commission, he met the requirements.
Correct. He's not legally required to do any outreach. Actually, even under the ordinance, the way it states, it simply says, inform the city of efforts you to talk to neighbors. It does not require you to meet with anybody under the ordinance. There's a general, desire for the city as a whole to have these conversations, but the ordinance does not require any applicant to do that.
And the requirement, I guess, in terms of, under the information that was provided to the commissioners, the 95 notices that were mailed to those property owners in the mailing area, that did happen.
Correct. Yes, that's the city's notification.
And
we posted the property as well with the zoning sign.
Which is within 750 feet of the proposed, of the application, right?
Yeah, it's 750 feet from the property, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkman. Mr. Nichols?
And Ms. Glass, in response to your question, one of the requirements was what...
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Nichols?
This is a question for Mr. Kirkman. I'm puzzled by this notion that the Vice President of the Homeowners Association, who is outside of the 750-foot band, which is not required anyway, somehow, I'm just wondering if the implication is that everybody in the Homeowners Association, irrespective of the size of the Homeowners Association, gets a say on a matter like this.
So the ordinance requirement is to notify by mail every property owner within 750 feet of the subject property. And that's any piece of property that touches within that 750-foot radius. City uses county tax information to get the addresses for the owners of the property and uses that in our mailings. There may be, in some cases, common elements or other things that are operated by the HOA that is within that 750-foot area, but sometimes that's not the case on there. There's no mechanism to communicate with any kind of a neighborhood association, homeowner association, et cetera. It's all about notification to the individual property owners.
Thank you.
All right, one question, Ms. Skeen.
Well, on the rezoning request application, at the very top, it used to say, applicant is strongly encouraged to discuss this proposed zoning. And in the staff analysis and recommendation, the first line is, applicant is strongly encouraged to discuss this proposed original zoning and development with the surrounding community. So it's out there that it's encouraged, and that's what we've got in our packet is all these neighborhood communications. So no, it's not required, but it is strongly encouraged, and we look favorably upon applications because then we know that everyone's had an opportunity for buy-in. Right now, it doesn't look like they have all the facts they need.
Again, with all due respect, it seems to me that we asked the city if they sent out applications, notices, and they sent out over 90, and yet there's two people here who are in opposition to it, and one of them is outside of the 750-foot range.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have rebuttal time. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to ask staff a question. So this applicant did everything that was required, correct? We're bringing up a lot of other things but this is the infield.
Commissioner Gilmer, just to drive the point home of what I believe Mr. Kirkman stated earlier, the ordinance does not have a requirement for that community outreach on the part of the applicant.
Okay,
And I will note, it is our practice as staff when we have applications come in that we do make that comment that it is encouraged for you to do that for these types of conversations on there. So we let them know up front, but at the end of the day, the ordinance does not require that conversation, correct?
Thank you for that clarity. We'll hear for those in opposition. You have 5 minutes of rebuttal time.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Danby Castle, it was mentioned that it was only designed to have one way in and one way out. That is not correct. That was more of a loop that connected from Kings Mill to Pickering and only was broken up when 73 came through. So when 73 came through, it became a one-way in and one-way out. And that's why there was only 6 houses on it. So I just want to clarify that point. So that's as a result of 73, not part of the original design of that road. And the fact the road had to be severed due to 73. That was number one. And number two is that, and I had mentioned this retention pond issue, we are very sensitive to that because it resulted in a lawsuit. Sedgefield 9 sued Kings Mill and Kings Pond. So we had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars with attorneys and other monies to help make this. Now, the state did contribute towards their silt addition to that, but that's another reason why we were sensitive to it. And I guess my main question is that I don't understand, we probably wouldn't have as much concern if the development came from Roland Road into that development instead of through our development of North Danby Castle. I don't understand why that hasn't been brought up or discussed at all, because that is an existing road as well that can be accessed into that area.
Did you state your name and address?
Sorry. Spencer Lewis, 2835 Pickering.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else want to speak? Because you have 3 minutes and 25 seconds.
Stephen Blundell, 4400 Dublin Castle. Just to save time, I did not mention this earlier. I'm the president of the association, and there are 3 of us here representing the association, not just 2. And again, a lot of this has, I don't understand, since this affects the neighborhood, that the fact that Spencer lives outside of that 750-foot radius, that he should not have any say. One of the pictures that was shown was a house on the other side of High Point Road. That's not going to have any effect. This development will have 0 effect on any resident the other side of High Point Road. It's going to have plenty of effect on anyone within Kings Mill. Now, the gentleman said something about joining the association, and I'm sure this is a mistake. He did say joining Kings Pond, where there are 2 homeowner associations, Kings Pond, Kings Mill. Kings Pond doesn't join this plot. That's off on the other side of Kings Mill Association. So now I would say that I would need to have a meeting as to whether there's an agreement to have them join our association. I don't think that the board can do that on their own, which I would be happy to have. I do think it would have been worthwhile, even though it is not a requirement strongly suggested, that they had reached out to the neighborhood.
Let me just say, this is a recommendation. Whatever we determine here is a recommendation. It goes to City Council, and you have another month of time where the applicant can reach out to these members of the community that are asking questions, and you can have some serious conversation with one another.
I appreciate that the board is recommending that this be postponed and that there be a period where the developer can reach out and there can be communication between the developer and the HOA. I think that makes perfect sense.
Thank you, but the applicant has to agree to that.
Madam Chairman, I brought up this about 3 months ago when we were, as a board, we were suggesting that they go beyond. I think our duty ends here. We're saying that the applicant should keep communicating or whatever. I think it's kind of confusing. I think it's misleading, so I think we need to kind of...
So I'm going to withdraw that continuance effort because the way this works, we're annexing this, and it's a recommendation. Whatever we determine here is a recommendation, correct? And so there will be 30 days before it goes to City Council for their final approval for any conversation to have occurred with the applicant and your organization and so forth about your issues. Do we agree, Commissioners? I'd like to hear from any point of view. Greatly appreciate it.
I have to admit that I have mentally gone full circle on all of this evening. Like Ms. Skeens, I am disappointed that there was not community outreach. Yes, the city did what the city was obligated to do in terms of communicating in the 750-foot radius. And I understand why that's uncomfortable to some people, that it doesn't touch associations or anything, but the ordinance is specific that it is to property owners. And so we did what we were supposed to do as a city government. Typically, this commission has had a habit of seeking communication between the public and the developers and wanting to see that there has been some back and forth dialogue. So although the plan to me is attractive, I think it's well situated, it matches what is around it, and I see a lot of things that are positives for it. I was discouraged that there was not community outreach. However, we have the clarification that there is not a requirement that there be community outreach. So beyond this specific case, I think we, as a commission, have to decide and determine with legal advice whether or not we can make decisions based on a strong recommendation that there be outreach when it's not required. So that is something that is beyond this particular instance. But so it leaves me in a quandary, frankly. And if the applicant was willing to seek a continuance and have the dialogue, I think it would satisfy a lot of the people sitting here. It certainly can't be a requirement because you've met the ordinance requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Connor.
I'm not in a quandary. There is no requirement to give that notice. And so therefore, Mr. Ford did everything required. And this project strikes me as a perfect example of the kind of infill development that Greensboro desperately needs if we are going to have any hope of addressing the housing crisis. The discussions about what may or may not have happened relative to some ponds some years ago under different circumstances, I don't think that's within our purview anyway, and even if it is, I'm not persuaded by it because that's a different time and a different set of circumstances, and I don't think we are in the business of speculating about what might happen in this development. So I will be supporting this. And on the issue of a continuance, effectively, when this goes to City Council, that is your continuance. So you have a month to work with the neighbors and develop a coalition, and if the feelings are strong enough, then go to the City Council meeting and make your views known.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Nix.
before we get too much further into discussion, I guess just want to make sure there's still some time left for our rebuttal, so I just want to make sure we address that. If anybody else had something to say, have you said all your things?
The opposition has a minute and 34 seconds. If you would like to say anything in addition, you can.
No, I have nothing more.
Thank you so much.
And, Chair Magid, Crystal Presley online doesn't wish to speak, just wanted her presence known.
Do we know if he's in opposition?
She is observing, but is a witness under defeat.
All right,
and received
let's
a
hear
report
from
about
her. Let's hear from her. She has a minute and 32 seconds.
it. Chair Magid, she didn't want to speak. She just wanted her presence known to the board.
She wants to know that she's online watching, but she's not interested in speaking.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly Gaines. We know that you are listening.
Hello, I'm here. This is Crystal.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Crystal Presley. I'm at 4406 North Danby Castle Road. I'm adjacent to the property. And like Mr. Stephen was saying,
Zoom, we need to see you.
oh, I'm sorry. Is it on now?
It's your video.
Okay.
Camera.
Open the camera. Is it open?
If her name's not showing, her video feed is on, but it may not be working correctly.
I tried to do the video. It's got the just doing it won't. I don't know how to make it come up. Video settings. It's telling me something about video settings.
Okay, proceed.
Okay. I just my concern too is just basically the traffic. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I am within the 750 area. So, yeah, I'm really concerned about the traffic. I think someone had told us that there would be another road that would go through, but then I'm hearing there's not going to be another road. So that was my huge concern.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now, we're at the point now that we've spoken and we've said a lot, and so I would like to close the public hearing now. We've had a lot of discussion. I would entertain a motion. Would someone make a motion in favor of this?
Sure, I'll make the motion. Get to the right page, though. Which one?
We need to do the annexation first.
First we need a motion to annex the property and vote on that, and then we'll do the zoning.
Commissioner Gilman make a motion that we annex the property.
I'll second the motion. Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmer and Ms. O'Connor. All right, now we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Now I'd like to hear a motion regarding the zoning.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the new zoning. This is item Z24-11-001. The Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its action to recommend approval of the original zoning request for the property at 4409 North Danby Castle Road from County CZPD RSP, which is conditional zoning plan development, to residential with special use permit for the master sign plan, to city R5 residential single family -5, to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form, map, and future land use. The proposed city R5 zoning district permits uses that fit the context of surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest. And I should also add to the motion that the commission noted disappointment in the community outreach that was done, but also notes that it was not a requirement of the requested action.
Commissioner Gilbert, second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols and Mr. Gilbert. Now, we're going to take a vote, but would you please raise your hand this time so I can see how many are in favor? So all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Opposed? That passes. This constitutes a favorable recommendation and is subject to a public hearing on Tuesday, December 17th, 2024, City Council meeting. And thank you, Mr. Kirkman. We learned a lot in that process. We appreciate it. The next item is Z24-11-004, a rezoning request from R5 Residential Single Family 5 and RM18 Residential Multifamily 18 to CDLI Conditional District Light Industrial for the properties identified as 1326 Seminole Drive and a portion of 1041 Battleground Avenue, generally described as northwest of Benjamin Parkway, east of Wilden Place, and northeast of Seminole Drive, approximately 2.96 acres. And Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair Maggot. This is the zoning map of the subject property, which shows that it contains approximately 2.96 acres and is located northwest of Benjamin Parkway, east of Wilden Place, and northeast of Seminole Drive. This is a rezoning request from R5 and RM18 to Conditional District Light Industrial. North of the request is Zone RM18 and Conditional District Commercial Medium. East of the request is Zone RM18, Conditional District Commercial Medium, and Light Industrial. South of the request is zoned Light Industrial and R5, Single Family Residential 5. West of the request is Zone R5 and RM18. This is the aerial map of the subject property. The subject property formerly contained an apartment complex and a single-family dwelling. You'll notice the water treatment facility to the southeast. That is part of the subject property, but it is not part of this request. The current water treatment facility is already zoned light industrial. This request is for the properties that you saw that were zoned R5 and RM18. You'll note that north of the request contains single-family dwellings, the greenway, and office uses. And east of the request contains a portion of the greenway, office uses. South of the request contains, again, the existing water treatment facility, single-family dwellings. And west of the request contains single and multifamily dwellings. This image shows a portion of the subject property as seen from Seminole Drive. This is a portion of the subject property as seen from Wilden Place. And this is the wastewater treatment facility, again, not part of the subject of the request. It is currently zoned LI. This image shows multifamily dwellings located northwest of the request on Wilden Place, zoned RM18. This is a multi-tenant office building located northeast of the request on Battleground Avenue, zoned CDCM. And this image shows examples of the single-family dwellings that are located south of the request on Seminole Drive, zoned R5. This image shows a single-family dwelling located west of the request, zoned R5. This image shows multifamily dwellings located west of the request on Wilden Place, zoned RM18. This view is facing northwest on Seminole Drive. The subject property is located on the right. And this is facing southeast on Seminole Drive. The subject property is on the left. This view is facing north on Wilden Place. The subject property is on the right. And this is facing southeast on Wilden Place. The subject property is on the left. This is the condition that has been proposed by the applicant. And in recommending approval of this request, staff notes the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan designates this property as urban central on the future built form map and as commercial and residential on the future land use map. The proposed rezoning request supports the comprehensive plans filling in our framework strategy to invest in building and maintaining city services to sustain livable neighborhoods and the prioritizing sustainability strategy to promote resilient, efficient, and environmentally beneficial patterns of land use. The proposed CDLI zoning district as conditioned would allow for an expansion of the existing public utility use on the adjacent property, which is necessary to allow the city to keep up with the increased demand in public utilities. Care should be taken with respect to building orientation, building materials, building height, and visual buffers to ensure an appropriate transition to the lower density residential uses on adjacent properties. And with that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions from the commission? Okay. If the applicant would come forward and give your name and address, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tony Baker. My address is here, 300 West Washington Street. I'm the Chief Deputy City Attorney for the city. Work with Mr. Ducharme, who's advising you tonight in the City Attorney's office. I'm here also with Christine Williams, who is the Assistant Director of the Water Resources Department for the city, and Monica Jarrett, who is the Project Manager for this specific project for the city. And I don't know how often this happens, that the city brings a rezoning request to the Planning Commission. Mike could probably tell me if it, at least for Water Resources, one of the departments I represent, in I guess my 4 years or so, this is the first time having to make this request. I do want to, and I appreciate Mr. Carter giving the great lead into this, but I want to make sure we clarify one thing. This is not wastewater. This is drinking water. Big difference is there's no lagoons, there's no odor. All of this is done under roof, inside. This is pulling water out of Lake Brant and, of course, distributing drinking water throughout the city. So that's a big distinction I want to make sure that was very clear for the commission. I think a little history, and I didn't realize this until we started this project. This water treatment plant has been here since the 1880s. At some point, there was some sort of pumping system that pulled water out of North Buffalo Creek and distributed it. Can't tell you if they cleaned it, can't tell you if they took the dirt out of it, but they sent water out from this site. And of course, it has grown over time. The neighborhood on Seminole Drive was platted in 1928. It was not really developed until 1940s. Of course, you got the Depression, but it started to build out in the 1940s. And obviously, the neighborhood and Mitchell treatment plant have somewhat grown up together over time. This project has been ongoing for over 5 years. The City Council in 2019 approved the purchase of several of these pieces of property, and their resolution was for the explicit purpose of the Mitchell Water Treatment Plant expansion. Then the last property was purchased in May of 2024, again, by the City Council, authorizing that purpose for the express purpose of expanding the water plant. And of course, we're here to have the property properly rezoned so we can effectuate the council's intent and effectuate Water Resources' need for expanded water treatment, as well as taking the forever chemicals out of our water, which is a big part of this project. Again, Mr. Carter's already shown you the one add-on to the property that we're seeking to rezone. I think everybody's probably heard of PFOS, forever chemicals. For whatever reason, we have them in our groundwater. We're at the top of our water table as far as we don't have water coming upstream to Greensboro. It starts from Greensboro and it goes downstream. And for a couple of reasons, we have forever chemicals in our groundwater that get into our water supply. And there is a process called granular activated carbon. And if you ask me that exactly what it means, the best I can tell you is they run the water through charcoal and it cleans it. That's a horribly simplified version from a lawyer of what happens, but it is an incredibly expensive process, but it is a process that takes the PFAS out of it. We are required to take the forever chemicals out by federal regulations by 2029. The challenge with this rezoning is the water plant is where it is. And you can imagine the water plant has very big pipes that leave and go into the community, and they branch off into smaller pipes. It is physically impossible to relocate that water plant somewhere else. It's also physically impossible to clean the water from the PFAS anywhere else. You have to do it there before it gets into the big pipes and goes to the community. And I say this just to keep in mind that physically and fiscally, if we're going to clean the water, it's got to be done at this location on this site, and the zoning requires that it be conditional light industrial to be done on this site. It is conditional light industrial, which means we did have a public meeting. Let me get that up front very quickly. There were notices sent, there were public meetings, and if you have questions about the details of those meetings, Ms. Jarrett, who managed that process, is here. But I know there was an initial public meeting. The residents sent back a petition with certain requirements that we're going to go over. Ms. Jarrett responded to that petition and then held a second public outreach meeting with the residents. And if you have questions about who attended, the number of attended, then I'll bring her up to answer those questions at the appropriate time. But there was a good deal of correspondence, email, as well as mail, but then also 2 meetings with the folks that wanted to attend to hear about this process. A couple of things that the neighbors asked about, that there be consistent wrought iron fencing, and I think Water Resources is committed to using some type of decorative, Monica, you're going to yell at me if I say this incorrectly, but a more attractive fencing that meets Homeland Security needs that would border Seminole Drive. There have been a number of questions about vegetation on the Seminole Drive side of the fencing so that you can't see the fencing. Homeland Security doesn't like that because people then climb the trees and get over the fencing, and even though it's water treatment, you may not think, what's the security? Someone puts a bad bug in the water treatment, the water, and so security really is an issue. So then why can't you put shrubbery on the Seminole side of the fence? Well, then people hide behind the fence to cut through the fence to get in. So there will be appropriate landscaping, and the neighbors have asked that it be evergreen. And Water Resources has agreed, but that will be on the inside of the fencing to provide some vegetative buffer from the neighbors and from the plant. There's been a request that we close off the Seminole Drive access. That is not a commonly used access, but there are times when it has to be used. I think in the most recent, somewhere since I've been here, there was some work done on the main entrance, which meant the Seminole Drive had to be used. But that's why it's there. It's an alternative route, but we don't have the option of closing it. There have been questions about lighting, and again, the lighting is not intended to light up the neighborhood. It's intended to provide security inside. It will be directed inside the facility, but we're also subject to Homeland Security requirements of what that lighting has to be and what it has to light. But the focus will be inside the facility and obviously not the neighbors. All of this, the processes take place under roof, inside walls. We don't anticipate there being any noise that would violate the city's noise ordinance, that would outrageously disrupt the neighbors. And of course, we're keeping that in mind when they design the buildings and design these processes. If there is a stormwater device required, it'll be done underground. It won't be an open stormwater pond. They can do that with massive culverts underground and take care of it that way. And all of these things came about in working with the neighborhood. I'm trying to address it ahead of the folks that may come up and speak with you in just a few minutes. There was a request, and this picture shows the requested 100-foot setback from the property lines, and this depicts what a 100-foot setback would be. And of course, you can see that it would it goes over a number of the current buildings, which we in the existing property, which we can't accommodate. We are committed, obviously, to meeting the 45-foot setback as required by the zoning ordinance, but the 100-foot simply takes out too much property to make this an effective project. And unfortunately, we're just simply not able to comply with that. There will be an equipment storage building. It's going to be the tallest building on the property. It'll be 3 stories. When you think about inside, it's going to be a big open space inside that will have either an overhead crane or something to allow them to move equipment around to maintain the heavy equipment that will be needed. But it will be encapsulated inside, but it will be at least 3 stories. That's still under the 50-foot limit for required by this zoning ordinance. And I think the design now is for that maintenance building to be on the back of the property away from Seminole Drive so that it's not the first thing that they see driving down Seminole Drive. We have had a request from the neighbors, I think we had today, that the buildings take on what's called a pyramid shape, meaning that you slant the front of the buildings, when you reach the height. And I think we're able to accommodate that, not by condition, but we'll try to accommodate that with some of the smaller buildings. With the maintenance building, because of the necessary height to have an overhead crane, that building is going to be largely squared off and rectangular, and we could not accommodate the pyramid style with that building. But Water Resources is considering that in the design of the other buildings that will be on the property. Those are my comments for the commission. Again, this is to provide PFAS clean drinking water for the residents of the city. And if you have any questions for me or for Ms. Jarrett.
I'll open it to the commissioners.
I have a question. It seems that at least some of the items that you listed in your presentation are conditions, but they're not part of the zoning request, so I'm confused.
They're not conditions in terms of, the only condition that's a part of this zoning request is that we have agreed we're not going to put any billboards, as is allowed under light industrial. So there will be no billboards on the property. I'm giving to you conversations that we've had with the neighbors, and that Water Resources will do their best to accommodate through the design process. But again, we're subject to Homeland Security requirements, and there's also overhead power lines. We're subject to do power requirements as far as vegetation. But there's some things that we will try to accommodate as best we can, such as the vegetation, the fencing, the pyramid construction style. We're just not far enough in the design process at this point to come anywhere close to making those a condition.
Could you flip back to your first, it's the next one, I guess.
One more?
It was when you started listing what the requirements, proposed requirements would be. There, yeah. So some of those still strike me as conditions.
And I apologize if I presented them that way. These were conversations with the neighbors, things that they requested, and our responses to how we could try to accommodate those within the confines of the other regulatory scheme that we have to work with.
But there's no commitment here to do this. It's only if we can.
Well, in the sense that, the Water Resources and of course, represents the City Council, who represents the elected individuals. I think they have done a good job in the past of trying to work with the neighbors, and will continue to do so as best they can within the regulatory scheme.
Thank you.
Just trying to clear up some confusion on my part. The letter that was sent out on August 21st to the neighbors says the zoning will be conditional and exclude the ability to construct billboards. But we have no conditions other than the billboards. So we have will be conditional and. So what are the conditions?
That is the condition, that we will not construct billboards on the property as permitted in light industrial.
It's not the way it reads. I don't think that's the way it reads. All right.
I apologize.
In the notes on the questions and discussions, 9V7. The current plan is to eliminate the entrance on Seminole Drive and route all construction water treatment plant traffic to the existing entrance on Benjamin Parkway and the proposed entrance on Battleground Avenue. But then I just heard you say earlier you would not be closing the entrance on Seminole.
I think yeah, please come on. I'll let you address that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monica Jarrett, work for Water Resources. So in the meeting, the first meeting that we talked to them about closing Seminole Drive, after that meeting, we realized that there may be an emergency, it may need to be an emergency exit along Seminole Drive. So we are going to close the current entrance on Seminole that goes into the plant, but we might have to evaluate whether or not an additional entrance is needed. If we do need an entrance for emergency access, then we will limit the traffic that goes in and out of there to maybe personal vehicles for staff only, not any trucking along Seminole. All trucking will go in either the Benjamin entrance, or there is going to be an entrance added on Battleground.
And you wouldn't be comfortable adding that as a condition if there would be no trucks entering on using Seminole, or all trucks would use, I mean, something, what I've heard from the neighbors is concerned about all the trucks that were on Seminole and the chemicals and the furic acid tanker trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And so if this is going to expand, then the potential is so will the traffic. So I'm looking for anything I can grab a hold on that would be a way to.
And our attorney would like to speak first.
Commissioner Skeens, if I may, I apologize. Certainly I think that if the applicant were to offer up additional conditions, that's within their purview to do as the applicant. But I think what we're hearing is this is an application with one condition on it. And I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth.
I was just trying to. I had contradictions with the papers in front of me based on their meetings and comments.
Yes, ma'am.
Stu Nichols, I just have a question for clarification, and this may be actually a question for staff and not for the applicant, but in the board book, there, in the book that came out in advance, there's a satellite image where there's a yellow boundary around the outer limit of the property, and then within that, there's an orange rectangular box, and it's not clear to me why that is called out. Is that, and in visiting the property, there's a structure there. Is that carved out of this rezoning, and if not, why is there a boundary around it?
That's a former lot line. They have recently purchased that lot. It is a lot line.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
it is included in this request, though.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you. Now will be those wishing to speak in opposition. Would you please come forward and line up on this side of the room? And please give your name and address. And as a group, you have up to 10 minutes.
Hey, my name is Brandon Porterfield. I live at 1348 Seminole Drive. So I'm 2 houses over from where this is going to be taking place. I'm pretty much the spokesperson for the community. I've reached out, got everyone to sign the petition, almost everyone on the neighborhood. As you guys have heard, a lot of our concerns have been met with promises for vegetation, new fencing, adding brick cladding along the side of the building so it will be integrated into the community, which is great. But our major concern is dealing with scale. And we haven't been told exactly where these buildings are going to be. We know there's going to be multiple buildings, and they could be upwards of 50 feet tall. And that's pretty alarming when you have a neighborhood of just single-family houses that are 20, 25 feet tall compared to a 50-foot building. It's going to feel really big. And what we're afraid of is if you're going down Seminole, you're just going to see a wall of brick. So one of our asks was to potentially push those buildings back further. So when I said the 100-foot setback, it was basically take that 45 and double it, more or less. So we have more frontage, more green space, and so when you're looking at the building, it's not going to feel as big. That would also allow the building to sit down in the hill, because if you look at the site, you have Seminole here and you have Battleground down here, and it slopes pretty dramatically. And the townhomes behind Seminole took advantage of that. So we have 2-story buildings that are behind us, but when you're standing on Seminole, you can see right over them because they take advantage of that slope. So one of the things we're asking is that they push these buildings as far back as possible, drop down on the slope so the scale doesn't feel as overwhelming. When I proposed the pyramid, that was looking at potentially keeping the setbacks exactly where they are, but then taking a 45-degree angle, imaginary line, and then get to 50 feet, so then you can build up to that 50 feet. But if you get close to that triangle, the imaginary triangle, you drop in scale. And so by getting closer to Seminole, the building footprint would get a little bit smaller, and it would blend in with the neighborhood a little more, rather than building right up to the 45-foot line and having a 50-foot tall building. We're just afraid that the scale and all this brick, because we know they're going to be storage buildings, and so there's not going to be a lot of glazing. So you're not going to have a lot of rhythm. You're not going to have the human scale. It's probably going to look pretty intimidating to have that much brick. So the further back we can get and further down the hill, that's really all we're asking for. Besides that, we think it's, we definitely need to have it. Thank you.
Jonathan Wade, 1319 Seminole Drive. I'm not really in opposition to this. I just wanted to make sure that some of, as Brandon said, some of the promises that have been set forth are going to be accommodated. I know the LDO has requirements that will screen, keep us safe, and I'm not that worried about that. But there's been talks of a greenway and a sidewalk in conjunction with this project, and that, in my mind, adding to the community through those items. I know they're a separate project as well that's not really in conjunction with this, but they've been promised kind of with this project, and I think we just want to see if there's improvement to the water treatment plant, that the neighborhood also sees some of those improvements through the form of sidewalk, greenway. Since we are basically adjacent to the greenway with Lake Daniel Park, Westerwood area, we have no sidewalk throughout our neighborhood, and with especially the street traffic, when I heard that one of the entrances, there's actually two entrances on Seminole Drive. One is a main entrance, the other is probably the access entrance for a lot of those trucks. That access entrance is currently in the area that would be re-fenced, re-landscaped. So I guess cutting off one of those entrances for a neighborhood of single-family residential that have young children is, in my mind, a necessary safety precaution with work trucks. A Knox box will get any emergency vehicle into that gate and won't let anybody else in. So I might be a alternative as well. But again, I'm not opposed to this project. I see the benefit of it. I just want to make sure that the city is held to the land development ordinance and their improvements, and that the neighborhood does not see any benefits with this project. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Caroline Cook, 1341 Seminole Drive, Greensboro. Right now, we have the information that there's only one condition for this, and that is no billboards. But we have lived in this house since 1997. It's extremely important to us how this whole area will look. So that's the landscaping, the fencing, where this gigantic plain brick building 50 feet high is going to be located on this area. And I am in favor of cleaner water. I'm an environmentalist, but I'm very much like my neighborhood, and I would like this addition to the water resources plant to fit into a residential neighborhood. I don't know if we can ask for further conditions or not.
Thank you. There's 3 minutes and 44 seconds left for anyone who wants to speak in opposition. Of course, while we wait for that, I have to ask the question again, okay? This is a conditional application, correct? Because we have a condition.
Yes.
Okay. And could you just clarify, someone clarify, is it because of Homeland Security or some other reason? You know, I know that you're not at the point that the next step would be, you know, the design part and so forth of this development, you know, where you do an evaluation of the site profile and all of that, the lighting plan and all of that. But is there some reason why at this point some additional conditions can't be added?
Well, Chairperson Maggot, I think you hit the nail on the head, is that the first step is getting the rezoning. But of course, then the engineers have to come and evaluate the site and consider where can we actually place these buildings, considering the functions that they need to perform. The slide you have up right now, you can see Seminole Drive in the lower right-hand corner. This is the current proposed site plan where you have the maintenance building on the back side of the property towards, I believe that's Battleground. Thank you. And the GAC, the granular activated carbon, being closer to Seminole, that is the building where we think the engineers can use that pyramid-style construction to slope the front of that so you don't have that wall. But that is not the three-story building. The three-story building would be the maintenance building. And I understand your question, why can't we commit? Because we need the engineers to tell us, based on this property, where can we locate these buildings to perform the functions that they're going to perform. And we simply can't commit to that at this point. Of course, again, Water Resources is a member of the public, represents the city council who is elected by voters. They're going to do what they can to satisfy the concerns that we've heard from the neighbors, but engineering in the process is ultimately going to control that, unfortunately.
I think you were asking why we couldn't add more conditions. Is that correct? Or why we couldn't add conditions?
Yes.
So in working with planning, our understanding through the process is that if we are meeting the ordinance requirements for light industrial, that we cannot put conditions on the property for those items where we are meeting the ordinance. But I would like clarification.
Yeah, I think what she's talking about is that the ordinance does have certain conditions, for lighting especially was one of the ones we talked about. And in doing conditions, you can't basically repeat the ordinance on there. So lighting is addressed in terms of being shielded, angled, limited, and how much, that kind of thing on there with that. And there are other standards of the ordinance that get to landscaping and some of those things as well. So I think the biggest question was just not repeating ordinance requirements. And I think the information we got to was, again, the site design's pretty early in the process. It's hard to say for sure what they can and can't commit to. Then there's the wrinkle with the Homeland Security requirements that any expansion would have to meet their requirements as well. So that's the information that we were given as well as to why there were not additional conditions added to this request.
Can I ask a question about this plan that you have on the screen right now? Of those, we're talking about the 3 red brick buildings. So are all of those treatment facilities? Because I heard in part of the presentation that there would also be office space for staff, or perhaps some of those are storage. So I'm trying to figure out what of those, or are all of those essential to water treatment at that location?
Yep. So I don't know if you can see my cursor. Where did it go? Mm-hmm. So the building that does not have a roof on it, that is for water storage. And then the building next to it is the what they call the GAC system that's going to treat the water. The building over closest to Battleground, that is what we call the operation and maintenance building. So that is a building related to, we don't have enough space in our the current staff land to hold all of the staff. We need to expand for staffing purposes, but also it is a maintenance area and an equipment storage area. One of the requests was that we try to limit not have equipment storage outside. So that building is going to help us to contain the equipment inside there, but also one thing that we aren't able to do as much at the water plant is to maintain some of the equipment on site. So this will allow us to do some of that on site as well, while keeping it indoors and maintaining it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? But they've switched the clock a couple of times. So.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
I just had one thing, Brandon Porterfield, 1348 Seminole Drive. As they mentioned, if they get the rezoning, they'll be able to put what they want on here, which is great. And the renders look great. However, we don't know where they're going to be, as they said. So that's our only concern, is because if they're not putting the conditions, we don't know exactly where this is going to be. So we are worried that, though right now they're showing it towards the rear, they could spin it around after they've had it evaluated and realize that it looks better the other way. And then we're going to have a big building as opposed to being hidden. That's all.
Can I just address that a little bit? You know, the next design steps would include an evaluation of the site profile and the lighting plan. So this is one of your important concerns.
Yeah, so I was
that
asking...
I would keep track of their schedule, find out what their schedule is for the next steps.
Yes.
Where you can then input and have a conversation. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. Yes, yes, we still have.
Jonathan.
See, it just changed back to, okay.
Go ahead. To the mic. Jonathan Wade, 1319 Seminole Drive. Little background, actually. I'm a civil engineer by trade and do a lot of site development, site layout in the city. And so I have a pretty good background of how this all works out, understand the timeline of things, understand the stormwater implications, and totally okay with that. I will say, in regards to some of the other neighbors' concerns with these buildings, prior to the demolition of I believe it was either 54 or 72 apartment units that were there was one, much more traffic than there is right now, and two, those buildings were probably 50 foot tall already. Based on what I have seen off these renderings and kind of a little bit of background with Monica, it seems like the final grade of these buildings will be lower than the apartments were to begin with. So, you know, and in my mind, I'm not that worried about the actual treatment plan itself. I'm kind of more worried about what our other neighbors saw in the conditions and how the city is going to be held to some of the promises they've made that are not conditions, which I get not doubling up on those zoning conditions if they're already in the LDO, because y'all are held to build to that LDO. So I guess my main concern would be with some of the non-conditional promises that there is somehow a verbiage put in there that as Brandon said, 2 months, 3 months down the line, well, we've changed up the whole plan, and we've been fed a bunch of lies, and you know, and so that would be my main concern, is that we have some sort of the city is held to what they've promised to the neighborhood. So that's all kind of I have to say. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. I'm just having some trouble understanding, and I think I need some help from the staff on this interpretation. If there are things like Homeland Security regulations or whatever, could there not even be conditions that would say subject to Homeland Security this or whatever these other parameters might be, then these conditions would be included?
Commissioner Turner, I think the primary concern that I would have, and I'll let certainly have staff speak to this maybe a little bit more, would be the more conditions that you place on the conditions, the more qualifying language you place on it, the more uncertain it gets. And I think that the theme of sort of what you've heard from Attorney Baker tonight is just the degree of needing to go through the process to see what is doable. But I'll let staff speak to that, or perhaps Attorney Baker has more to say on the point.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think the question becomes, have you set an unrealistic expectation potentially with a condition that's referencing potential conflict with federal regulations? That's my understanding. Attorney Baker can speak to it a little bit more, that just because there is uncertainty at this level of what ultimately some of these things could be done or not done in a certain scenario, they're not comfortable putting them in as formal conditions. That's, I think, where you're at right now.
And if I could clarify, I want to make sure that this is understood. I mean, everything that's being suggested conforms to the zoning ordinance. There's a 50-foot maximum building height. It'll be conformed. There's a 45-foot setback. That will be conformed. We'll do the best we can with the vegetative buffer in terms of what Homeland Security will allow. We really have no choice, and that's course designed for the protection of the drinking water. We'll try to do a more attractive fencing, which I think it will be more attractive, but again, that has to conform to Homeland Security requirements as far as security for the facility. So we will conform to the zoning ordinance for light industrial, everything that's met. But the primary purpose here is cleaning the water of forever chemicals and expanding the water treatment capacity for the growth of the city.
And I'm not a staff person, but I will say if you put a condition, if there are conditions put in place, then Homeland Security has objections to that, then it's like the conditions cancel out the conditions. So you're essentially in the same predicament that you were in to begin with, if that makes sense. I think it sounds like it's going to put the city in a compromising position to be able to overpromise or to promise things that they just can't do, even if the city wanted to do that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I could not have said that any better.
Thank you. Okay, so we have used all of the opposition time and the applicant time in the rebuttal. So, and we've had a very lively discussion. So, I would like to close the public hearing now and open it for any final thoughts, and then we'll entertain a motion. Any final thoughts from anyone in terms of supporting it or not supporting it and your feeling? Thank you.
I'm in a quandary. I'm really bothered by the comments that were made in the public meeting and the comments and the expectations that the neighbors came away from on the meetings, and then it was, oh no, we can't do that, or no, we're not going to do that. And in terms of height restrictions, I understand what you're talking about, walls of brick, and certainly there have been, I don't know why Homeland Security would be concerned if for instance and for illustrative purposes only, you are specifically limiting the height of any buildings adjoining residential to be no more than a certain height. that would give some assurances to the neighbors as far as walls of brick, and not necessarily impede the development of the property, because it does have some gullies. There's going to be some grading that will be done. So I'm bothered in general by comments that were made in neighborhood meetings, what has come before us with only the condition of no billboards, and yet some concerns that still aren't being addressed that the neighbors have, specifically on height restrictions and walls of brick. I think the fencing they can work through, I understand. So I've still got some concerns, so talk to me, folks.
I will be supporting the item. I think that I understand what staff is saying. I understand what the neighborhood is saying. But I feel like maybe the neighborhood is expecting more from their conversation than staff can actually do, more than they can actually do. And they are saying that they have restrictions for Homeland Security. And with this plant being here since the 1800s, and I think that was before the neighborhood was built, I know things change. But I'm going to have to go along with look at the rezoning itself. And that's what I will be supporting. We do need clean drinking water at this time. And I rely on staff to work with Homeland Security and whoever else is necessary to bring it about. Thank you.
Well, I guess to answer Ms. Skeens' concerns, well, not to answer, but to comment that this still has to go, the plan has to be done by the engineers. And I guess sounds like what the city does not want to do is to pin themselves into a corner to say that we can, the height requirement or the buildings will be no taller than existing buildings on the property. And if the engineer says, well, in order to accommodate all the services that we're planning to, well, the equipment, the staff, all of those things, we're trying to accommodate those things with the current plans in mind, then we'd have to start all over with this process again. I guess that's the standpoint that I'm seeing it from, and I certainly hear the neighbors, and I would have concerns as well. But this is an existing water plant they're attempting to add to versus starting from scratch. Again, not to say that the neighbors' concerns are not valid, because I'm sure I would have the same as well, but I think what happened, it just sounds like the city is just really concerned about over-promising or making any promises or conditions without that input from the engineers, I think is what I was hearing, and would not be able to provide all of those services, to store the equipment, to have the additional staff, to meet whatever Homeland Security requirements are, although I think that depends on with our next administration, but nevertheless, I guess that's what I'm hearing, and I'm inclined to support the application as it's been presented tonight.
Stu Nichols, I'm also in support of the application. And I think it is, first of all, I think the opposition deserves a lot of credit for your flexible and pragmatic response to all this. I know it's difficult to have something like this coming up in your neighborhood, but you've demonstrated an understanding that this is something that needs to happen. It's just a question of how it happens. I think it's not necessarily the job of the Planning and Zoning Commission to design the facility. So concerns about height of buildings and what it would look like are certainly understandable, but I don't think that's what we do. Turns out that in my day job, I'm a national security professional, and I can say to Commissioner Turner's observations or questions about attaching conditions that relate to national security concerns, you can't really do that, because if there is a terrorist act next week, then the national security concerns will change rather dramatically. So that's not reasonable. I think the neighborhood has to take a bit of comfort in knowing that there are a lot of different stakeholders out there who will be part of this process, that will be looking after the concerns that you have in your very, very charming neighborhood. And I hope that all of the various stakeholders take that into consideration, and I'm confident that they will.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Anyone else? Okay, great. I will entertain a motion.
Erica Glass. This is in the matter of Z-24-11-004. Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its action to recommend approval of the rezoning request for the properties at 1326 Seminole Drive and a portion of 1041 Battleground Avenue from R5 Residential Single Family -5 and RM18 Residential Multifamily 18 to CD-LI Conditional District Light Industrial to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. 2, the proposed CD-LI zoning district as conditioned permits uses that fit the context of surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. Number 3, the request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Commissioner Gilbert seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Glass and Mr. Gilbert. All right, now we're going to take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and please raise your hand, too. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Does that pass? That's 5. 5 to 6.
So with a less than 6 favorable, it becomes a recommendation from the commission and would automatically then move to city council.
This constitutes a favorable recommendation and is subject to a public hearing at the Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 City Council meeting. Thank you very much. That finishes our meeting this evening. Is there anything that the planning department would like to share with us? Any items that you would like to make us aware of?
No, we don't have anything else for the commission this evening.
Okay. Do we know how many cases we're going to have next month?
We have 5.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just a reminder, we changed the date of the January meeting to January 13, 2025, and we look forward to receiving an updated calendar.
The
So thank you very much.
The calendar that's provided has that date. Yes.
It's online? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so, I didn't see that, so I'm glad that you sent it. Thank you. I asked and you did. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to adjourn.
Did you ask for anything from us? Did you ask for anything from the commissioners? I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much.
And the city of Greensboro. Happy Thanksgiving.
And thank you all for coming regarding this case. Please keep interacting.